Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Legacy Years podcast. So, this is a podcast where we talk about embracing all the joys and challenges of aging. And my goal is always to share valuable tips and information so that folks can do just that. And I think the topic that we're talking about today is very important to a lot of older adults, and that is Medicare. And Medicare is such a big topic that we're actually going to break this down for you guys and do more than one conversation. So, welcome my special guest, Melinda. Melinda, thank you for being on. If you would tell everyone just a little bit about yourself and your company.
Sure. My name is Melinda Caughill. I'm a certified senior advisor. Probably the most important thing to know about me and my company is the fact that we do not sell Medicare insurance. When we work with clients or they're professionals, we work on a fee-for-service basis, like an accountant or an attorney. We do not make sales commissions from insurance products. So when we make recommendations or provide guidance, it is always in our client's best interest. We only work for you. We've been doing this since about 2012. My co-founder is actually my mother. My mother is a nationally recognized Medicare expert of decades. So I never, ever thought as a kid that I would be doing this. But that's why you never say never.
I think probably a lot of people feel that way about the career they end up in.
Right?
Yeah, so we all just kind of fall into something for some reason and we end up where we should be.
Oh, I believe so. I actually love what I do. I make a difference to people day in, day out in a situation, in a world that's very specifically confusing. So.
Yes, it is. It's so confusing. And I've heard so many people speak on this topic, and I'm still confused. And I still learn new things all the time. So I'm glad for your expertise. And so the first thing that we're going to kind of break down is the myths associated with Medicare. And I think there's a lot, and it's interesting because the timing of this is that, we were just dealing with some stuff with my father, and both my sisters said, well, doesn't Medicare cover any type of care like that? And I was like, absolutely, it does not. So I at least know something. So talk to me about those common things that folks think about Medicare that is not true.
Right. Let's start out with the one you just said. Medicare covers long-term care. It does not. What Medicare covers is called skilled care. So when you think of long-term care, most long-term care services do not require a degreed professional to be providing the care, meaning a degreed nurse, a physical therapist, a doctor. No, the care that most people need for long-term care is provided by home health aides, people without medical degrees. So we're talking about bathing, eating, dressing, toileting, transferring, continence issues. You do not need a degree nurse to help provide those services. Medicare does not cover those services, not a penny. So there are legislative things that are in the works that are trying to address this or that. But for the most part, Medicare does not cover long-term care. Use that as a rule of thumb. What Medicare can cover is what is called skilled nursing facility stays. In order to qualify for skilled nursing facility stays under Medicare, not Medicare Advantage, that's not what I'm talking about. Under original Medicare, you have to have a 3-day hospital admission. Meaning you are admitted into a hospital for 3 days. After that, you could potentially be discharged into a skilled nursing facility. Then under Medicare, you could have up to 100 days in your lifetime of skilled nursing facility stays. That's it. That's what we're talking about.
And 100 days doesn't cover a lot of time if you're talking about, a major illness.
Right. That's correct. So you need to be aware of the limitations and the restrictions. be prepared to cover your own long-term care. It is critical that people figure out a long-term care plan. I will tell you, Medicaid is some people's long-term care plan, but in my world, Medicaid, meaning Medicare, is health care for people 65 years or older, typically. Medicaid is aid. It is government aid provided to people to provide them with home health, to provide them with health care services when they cannot afford it. Now,
Right.
Medicaid is a plan, what is that in quotes, that some people say will be their plan for long-term care. Before you make that your plan, be sure to go visit long-term care facilities in your area that accept Medicaid. Ask them questions about waiting lists for a Medicaid bed. Be sure to figure out, is that really what you want for yourself before you decide to make that your plan? In my world, Medicaid is a failed long-term care.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that's solid advice. And, I've never told anybody go visit the facilities. That is eye opening. So I
Right.
love that you give that advice to people. I hope they take it.
I
Yeah.
hope so too, because
Yeah.
people have an idea of facilities, right? This isn't mine. I stole this from somebody. But often Medicaid is the difference between having lobster bisque and guided trips to the theater on the weekends versus a shared room, applesauce, and a communal TV. So what do you want? When you have a choice, make a choice. Otherwise, the government is going to make choices for you that very often are not the things that you would choose for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. So I do think that's probably one of the biggest myths that we hear people talk about. But what are some of the others that you hear from people and from your clients that you're like,
Absolutely.
oh, I wish, yeah.
Well, so the myth, Medicare doesn't cover long-term care, actually goes hand in hand with Medicare is free. There's a gentleman in Congress, in the Senate, that we all know and love, Bernie Sanders, who has been saying for a long time that we need in this country to do Medicare for all. Regardless of what you think of that, that's not the point. The point is, when Bernie Sanders goes out and says Medicare for all, and the tenets of the program he's proposing means that healthcare is free, it has no pre-existing medical condition, and that it's a single-payer system. That's what people then believe Medicare as it exists today actually is. No, Medicare is not free. It is actually not a single-payer system, and it does often have restrictions for pre-existing medical conditions. So I really, whatever you think about that proposal, I really wish they call it something other than Medicare for all. When I go and I talk to professionals, highly educated professionals in their 30s and 40s, for giggles, I often ask them a question. How much does Medicare cost? You would be shocked. 8, 9, 10 times, 8, 9, 10 times out of 10. Wow. Often. Basically, they will tell me Medicare is free. If you believe Medicare is free, why will you spend your accumulating years actually saving up for something that you hold for free?
Yeah.
So that's a critical myth that people need to dispel as soon as possible. Medicare is not free. It does not cover long-term care. The sooner we get those to our heads as 30, 40, and 50-year-olds, the better it is. I know Medicare is a program for old people. That's what 30, 40-year-olds typically think. It's somewhere in the vast distance for them, and it's not something they're thinking about, but they need to absolutely be considering what Medicare is if they're planning for retirement at all. Related to that, being 30s and 40s, the myth that Medicare doesn't apply to you. That, yes, it does. And let me explain. Medicare will affect you in your 30s, 40s, and 50s, when your parents' health starts to decline.
Right.
We like to think in our 30s and 40s and 50s that our parents' healthcare decisions are their business. We don't need to get all up in their business and ask them questions about what they decided or didn't decide. But yes, we do need to, especially for any female listeners out there. The reason I say especially for females is because in this country still, amongst family caregivers, 2 out of 3 family caregivers are females. So if you are in your 30s, 40s, or 50s, and you don't know the decisions that your parents made, take some time to go ask mom or dad, oh, what did you decide about Medicare? What plans are you enrolled in? Do you have a long-term care insurance? The reason that this is so crucial is because if your parents make a poor decision when their health starts to decline, not if, when their health starts to decline, guess who's going to be on the hook? You, typically the eldest, closest female child. That's typically how it goes. If mom doesn't have long-term care insurance, they thought Medicare covered long-term care, and for some reason and it's very common we do this, I'm never going to put my mom in a home, and I told her that. Well, guess what? Mom's moving in with you now. You're going to have to quit your job, maybe go part-time, and inevitably it is the female's retirement fund that then becomes the piggy bank for what is needed. So when you, the eldest, closest female child and without a caregiver, starts pulling out money from your own retirement fund, now you're potentially devastating your own future retirement.
Right.
You need to talk to parents. I know it's not a fun conversation. Nobody thinks it's fun. But unfortunately, when we're adults, sometimes we have to do things that we don't like to do just to be responsible. This is this critical discussion that we need to start having with our parents in this country. Or parents, start having the conversation with your children. If you believe your children are going to be your long-term care plan, you need to communicate that with them to make sure that this isn't a vague expectation of, well, I wiped my daughter's butt when she was a baby, now it's her turn. Does your daughter know this? Is she planning appropriately for going part-time or quitting her job? Is her own retirement going to be okay? We need to have.
Yeah. And I think that although they are very hard conversations to have, that if you really care about your loved ones, whether it's your parent or your kids, that they're important to have.
Yes, and there are guidance. There are tons of books out there. There are professionals to actually guide these conversations. So, as I mentioned in the beginning, I'm a certified senior advisor, CSA.us. I would highly recommend looking at the website and finding professionals who can guide this sort of conversations. They're called healthcare advocates. They are trained to often help manage conversation. The goal is to embrace conversation with love, not blame or guilt. So
yeah, awesome.
That's definitely a big myth. So we've hit on Medicare covers long-term care. No, it doesn't. We've hit on Medicare is free. It's not. And your parents' Medicare decisions are not your business. No, if they actually really, really are the adult's child's business. There are other critical myths that we can hit on to that, like, you can always make changes to your Medicare coverage later in life. No, very often when people make decisions when they are first enrolling in Medicare, those decisions can become permanent. Very often Medicare mistakes can become permanent and impact you for the rest of your life. Medicare is not all about picking a specific Medicare plan. That would probably be the fourth one I put in this category. When people turn 65, they like to believe that Medicare is all about picking United Healthcare, Humana, or Aetna plan. It is not. Medicare is so much more complicated than just picking a Medicare plan. The first step of Medicare enrollment is actually timing. Do you enroll in Medicare or do you delay? So please get to know the steps. Don't assume that Medicare is just about picking United Healthcare.
Yeah, and I think that getting advice from a professional at that critical moment, like, don't just think that you can do that research yourself. You need to talk to someone who knows what they're doing. You need to talk to someone who's a trusted advisor, and don't just open the yellow pages, which we don't have anymore, or go to Google and just pick someone. Be sure that you've got a recommended referral when you're
Right?
going to
And
start that process.
always understand where the money comes from. Follow the money.
Yeah.
Understand that the person that you're working with, if you are not paying them anything, where are they compensated? How does that compensation then impact the guidance that they are giving you? Understand that. And it's okay. A very good insurance agent will tell you how they are compensated, and they won't mind telling you where their conflicts of interest are. So bad insurance agents, and unfortunately people are out there and they don't wear signs. They're not going to necessarily want to tell you that they only represent 2 insurance plans and that they make 40% more selling one type, and that's the one they really like to sell. They're not going to tell you those things, but a good insurance agent will be very forthright about what they like, what they don't like, how they're compensated. They'll tell you. So be sure to ask them.
Yeah, I think that's important to know. And it's not really something that I've ever thought about before you and I met at the CSA conference in August. So I think that people hear what she's saying. Be sure that if you're going to pick a local Medicare representative to help you with your plan, that you know how they're getting paid.
And I think that's going to be a podcast that we specifically go into.
Yes, we will.
Compensation. And be sure to check out that podcast because we're going to dive into how to qualify a Medicare insurance agent. So I will give you step-by-step tips to pick a good agent versus a bad agent.
Perfect. So any other myths that you can think of that are kind of the common ones out there? We have a few more minutes if you have another.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, I've got a good one. A good one. All right. When people approach Medicare eligibility, as a rule, you are going to hear things that typically begin like this. Well, everybody has to something. Everybody has to get enrolled in Medicare when they turn 65. Everybody who's still working doesn't need to do anything in Medicare. Everybody has to get at least Medicare Part A. I don't know, whatever they are saying after everybody has to, but it always starts, everybody has to. Okay. That's a myth. All of them are myths. All of them. Because when it comes to Medicare, there is only one everybody has to state that's effectively true. I'm going to teach it to you. I call it the golden rule. So Medicare's golden rule is the only thing in Medicare that is true for everyone is nothing in Medicare is true for everyone. I know that sounds crazy, but I am not kidding. You can hand me one of those everybody has to statements, and I will give you, I will give you an exception. I will give you an exception. I will give you an exception. You may think you'll never fall into that exceptional group. It happens. And if it turns out that you are falling into that exceptional group where everybody has to get enrolled in Part A, well, no, it's not true. If you work for a large employer with employer-provided health coverage, it could be really bad to enroll in Part A if you are making contributions to a health savings account, because you have to stop making contributions when actually you could continue on making contributions as long as you are not receiving Social Security benefits. How about that for a mouthful? But this is why that I screwed technical mumbo jumbo to prove a point. There are always exceptions. And if you are one of those exceptions, bad things happen. You don't. So many people think they're not going to be part of the exceptional group until they are. And why didn't anybody ever tell me? Is then what they say.
Right.
I'm telling you right now, the only thing in Medicare that is true for everyone is nothing in Medicare is true for everyone. You need to look at your unique needs, not your spouse's, not your best friend, your unique needs. You have different birthdays, different medications, different medical needs, different employment situations, different healthcare coverage, different costs. Look at your needs.
Yeah. I think that's so critical. And so people, I hear all those things, and where you hear them all kinds of places. And I think as older adults, they hang out together and they hear things, and then they perpetuate it amongst, their circle of friends. And so, well,
I get it. It comes from a place of good intent. It comes from a place of, hey, it was really difficult for me to have to go through this. So here, let me help you. But unfortunately, it's packaged in, and everybody has to package, and it really does wind up hurting people.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's true. People just want to help. It's the same thing in our lending industry. When we'll talk to somebody, they'll be like, well, my sister's mother's cousin's brother's uncle did this, so I must do that.
Yeah, but are you your sister's cousin's brother's uncle exact situation and with home and finance and history and credit score?
No, absolutely not. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Melinda. This, believe it or not, we've filled 20 minutes already. And so we're going to come back and we're going to have a second episode for you guys. We're going to talk about original Medicare with Gap compared to Medicare Advantage, which I think is such a confusing topic for a lot of people. So, yes. So you guys, if you're listening to this one, stay tuned for that one coming up soon. Thank you again, Melinda.
Thank you. Bye.